our system as it is now, health insurance, and I think a lot of it is now coming to light in the last 5-10 years. They've been pushing, and the lobbyists have been pushing big things that weren't necessarily proper for most people and made a lot of money for a lot of people, but did not do well for the clients or the patients that were the recipients of these medications.
I distrust the system, and I'm sure I know that there are other things happening now, but back then, like oncologists, they got more money the more treatments that they did, and they probably told themselves, well, I'm just giving them their options, but not explaining like this, you might even die faster. I mean, so much of research has come out that it has said like a lot of radiation or chemo, when you look at, because a lot of hospice studies have been done, like, you know, a lot of times you die sooner than you would had you not had the treatment.
This episode almost did not make it off the ground. From a pug injury to technical glitches, Jenny demonstrates her remarkable patience and empathetic demeanor. There is not a person who leads with her heart more than my badass cousin. She discusses pursuing her passion and becoming a nurse, but along the way, she realized the need to step back and prioritize her family, herself, her career, and her side hustles. Although she is a Giants fan, I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did.
Cousin, thank you for joining me.
Thank
Podcast
you.
number 8.
I'm honored.
This was supposed to be number 4, but we're here. So in my preparation, I've done these common themes that I've noticed about a lot of people. And you're the art of reinvention.
Aw.
I love it. So why don't you give us a brief thumbnail sketch of where you started, where you're at, where you're now, wherever you're comfortable. It's just a conversation between us, and we'll take it from there.
I think I was like almost 30 when I really found out, figured out I had to get my shit together.
Uh-huh.
And I had both boys. I was a single mom, and I was like, I need to be able to take care of them because I couldn't, rely on my ex-husband.
Sure.
So I kind of always wanted to be a nurse, and it was because my grandmother's hospice nurse, I overheard her talking to a doctor when my grandma was on hospice. And I remember the nurse saying, well, you don't understand, she's suffering.
Yeah.
And she was such a badass. And the doctor didn't want to give her orders to increase my grandma's pain medication. And she didn't let it go. And she got the orders. And then I kind of had like this in the back of my mind, like, I want to be her someday.
Yeah.
And it really inspired me.
That's really
to be
neat.
A nurse.
Unfortunately, when you go into the hospitals or when you have to go in and see someone, the nurses are really the people that are on their patients 90%, 100% of the time. And the doctors are the ones that come in and give orders. But the people that the patient identifies with is the nurse, and they're the most compassionate, empathetic. And they're really the ones, I think, and this, correct me if I'm wrong, but running the whole entire fucking unit.
Well, that's true.
Great. I'm glad that observation is not incorrect.
Yeah.
Because in my experience, the nurses, and not to talk ill of the doctors, they got a lot of rounds. But
they work really hard.
The nurses are truly the hands-on, the people that have their hand on the pulse and know what's happening.
Yeah.
So that's very admirable. So tell us about your nursing background and where you went from, okay, I decided to be a nurse, and take us from there.
So it's so funny. When I was in nursing school, I got an externship at UC Davis in the operating room. And I was like, this is so not me, because the patients were all asleep. Yeah. And the surgeons were so like, I actually work with some surgeons that are not like this. Like things have changed a little bit. But
I hope so.
These guys are dicks. Like,
well, there is that stereotype that surgeons have a little bit of a God complex, right?
Yeah. These ones did. And I was like, okay, so the patients I don't get to talk to the patients. And I don't know about like standing in one place for this long. Like I think I'm a little too ADD.
Yeah. Need to be
so
emotion, right?
Yeah. So
it's a Lamborghini, I think.
It is. Keep swimming.
We'll get my mom on here one day and she'll be walking circles.
So there's gonna be a little path like a tiger. So I knew that wasn't for me. And then I was really, really lucky. It's really hard, especially in California, to get a full-time job, a daytime job, as when you first graduate. But what was nice is that my last round of clinicals was at Mercy General in Sacramento. And they hired me full-time on a cardiac step-down floor, which was like being thrown to the wolves.
It sounds intense.
Yes, it's so funny.
I mean, nursing's an intense experience no matter what, but wow, that sounds extra intense.
My first day when I walked onto that floor, there was a nurse charting her little notes at the computer, and she looked up and she just was crying. I was like, what?
Oh, poor lady. Just overworked?
Yeah. Oh, no, it was just stressful. Just so the problem with being on a cardiac step down or at a step down unit, no matter if it's neurology or whatever it is, it's like you're kind of stuck between like med surge where everybody, just like they need a gallbladder removed. And then you have a step down unit and then you have ICU. And so when there's not enough room in the ICU, then the other patients are there, but you still have the same ratios.
Sure.
So it was intense.
So it sounds like chaos stacked on top of chaos, added with a little more chaos.
It was really physical work because it's a cardiac unit, a lot of kind of big people, not everybody. I mean, you can have
but you're getting variety of people in there, and there's slight nurses, or you're lifting and moving and you're on your feet all day.
Yeah.
It's physical activity.
Definitely. But what really got to me with that job was the things that we were doing to people who didn't really understand that they didn't have to. Like doing like major cardiac surgeries on like an 80-year-old who might not know, who didn't really understand what the recovery was going to look like.
Sure.
Back then, I don't think that the doctors were as good as they are now. And they are all so much better about like explaining that you have options and that what your life might look like if you're choosing a certain treatment.
Sure.
And I mean, we still have a long way to go, but compared to
the
back
palliative
then,
care versus what was
we're
light years ahead of where we were when you started, right?
Yeah, if you do this, your life isn't going to look like what you think it's going to look like,
So I have a question about that because you have experience in this. I was listening to Malcolm Gladwell's new book on the way up to interview you today, and there was something about how small variation difference, and it's how local places treat each person differently. And did you notice that some doctors may have treated people because they were trying to bill for the file? In our healthcare system, people get paid to do operations or do certain care, and it might not be, I don't want to say it's not in conference with what the patient needs, but that's just how they do things, or our healthcare dictates that they have to do certain things. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
I think I was so Pollyanna, and I'm just so, I don't think that way.
You're like my wife. You lead with the heart, so you're just like, you want to see the best in everything.
Yeah, and I think I was just shocked the first time I heard a cardiologist say, well, this is a business. And I was like, oh, that's not the way I fucking look at it.
Yeah.
And
that's
that was
hard, huh?
It was really hard. And so it just became sort of a moral issue where I felt like it was just tearing me apart,
Totally.
And by the way, there were amazing doctors and amazing nurses too. It was just different than it is now. It was also like before opioids, like the opioid crisis. Like when I went to nursing school, they told us, like, if someone's having real pain, you cannot get addicted. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because it was like a pendulum.
Is it the Sacker family that was a pharma, the whole settlement?
Well, I think that, and they were like I remember our nursing instructors talking to us about the studies and not to worry because before people were suffering and people were being undertreated.
Yeah.
And then the nurses were like, they saw these studies and they were like the ones pushing to make sure that people were getting properly medicated, but we were told they are not going to get addicted if they have real pain.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. And
so time-wise, what are we looking at? Like 2010, 2015?
That was like 2008.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's been crazy seeing like
the evolution and the whole like everything that's been happening ever since then come through the medical community and like, okay, maybe this is not the proper way to treat people because they might come out addicted on the back end of this.
Yeah, or at least explaining that even if you're using this for real pain, you're still going to have withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah.
And those conversations did not happen at all. So looking back at it and how I was trained and seeing everything, I look back at it and I'm like, oh my God, we did such a disservice. But I think because we're nurses and we're taught to that we're the advocates.
Yeah. I think there's something that said what you put into a function, if you put in bad information, you're going to get a bad result. Mm-hmm. So if you're giving information that you believe is good,
right,
but in hindsight, it's actually terrible, the guilt complex, obviously, because you're a person with a huge heart, you might still have that guilt complex, not to absolve anyone that did it malintentionally, but
yeah,
at that time you were told this is good, and our whole system, good, bad, or ugly, is also driven by big pharma,
right,
who's pushing a lot of medication because they make a lot of money off of it. And so doctors may have good intentions and they might not have the time to go and explore all the science behind it because they're practicing and whatnot. I don't know the whole methodology behind it, but I feel like our system as it is now, health insurance, and I think a lot of it is now coming to light in the last 5-10 years. They've been pushing, and the lobbyists have been pushing big things that weren't necessarily proper for most people and made a lot of money for a lot of people, but did not do well for the clients or the patients that were the recipients of these medications.
I distrust the system, and I'm sure I know that there are other things happening now, but back then when like oncologists, they got more money the more treatments that they did, and they probably told themselves, well, I'm just giving them their options, but not explaining like this, you might even die faster. I mean, so much research has come out that it has said like a lot of radiation or chemo, when you look at because a lot of hospice studies have been done, like, a lot of times you die sooner than you would had you not had the treatment.
Sometimes you get bad information and you're not quite sure that the information you receive is 100%.
Yeah.
So doctors were doing things based upon things they may have not have known. So talk to us a little bit about that.
I think if you want to research something and find a study, you're going to find a study that supports your theory.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that because doctors are people and they have ridiculously demanding jobs, and I'm kind of grateful I wasn't a doctor because I see how hard it is and the stress they go through. And then their own lives, I think they're almost inundated with too much information.
Too much. They don't have the time to ferret out the good, the bad, and the ugly.
I think people sort of have like these realistic expectations and forget that they're people. And the way that they're trained now are so specific to their specialty that sometimes you might have a primary care provider who is ordering an opioid or whatever, or medications that they're maybe not trained to be prescribing, but they have to. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's just so they're people and they get burnt out and maybe they don't stay on top of like the latest.
Yeah, and doctors get inundated with people coming in and not advertising, but here's a new prescription. Here's a new drug that you might want to consider.
Right.
And there's pharmaceutical sales that are driven by the whole big pharma side that encourage doctors to prescribe something they might not know 100% about, right?
Right, and they're people, and they are influenced by the studies that you hear and like the government and everything else. Yeah. And menopause, like for women, is a great example. There were very few studies done, maybe 20, 30, I don't know how many years, but there were studies done, a small study where women who were receiving hormone therapy, they correlated it with breast cancer, but there were, especially back then, it's still true that most studies are white male-based studies, right?
Totally.
So women
weren't factors into it.
Right. And so they did this small study and saw this correlation with hormone replacement therapy and breast cancer. But it was such a small study, it ended up them, finding out years and years and years later that there is no correlation between breast cancer and hormone replacement therapy. So you've got generations of women who suffered through menopause that were told that they shouldn't have hormone replacement therapy because it causes breast cancer.
Sure.
And there are still a lot of doctors out there who will say, oh, I can't prescribe you that because it causes breast cancer.
Oh,
I mean,
geez.
it's still happening every day.
Yeah.
And these are OBGYNs,
Sure.
you know.
People
so
you're
it's
supposed
crazy.
to trust.
Exactly. So I think doctors are people too.
And science is also inexact. It changes and new things come about.
Right.
And there's so much stuff to stay on top of.
Right.
And
they
it's
were
really
just
hard.
women who we were supposed to suffer through it. And, you know, like, this is just because I think people also had this idea that it's because it's a natural course of your life that you start going through menopause, that everybody else has dealt with it. So do you.
Yeah. Suck it up and deal with it, or rub some dirt on it.
Exactly. So, and you know, why continue a study, spend more money on a big study?
Yeah.
You know?
And that's something, our hiccup with the technology, talked about Tamara earlier, but one thing we talked about in our podcast was the BMI scale.
Oh yeah, it's
and
ridiculous.
how the factors going in were males from the early 1900s or whatever it was. And I'm probably going to get fact checked on this, but
yeah,
it was male soldiers from Europe, white male soldiers, and back in the day they were X height, super thin, and so that data is being used to measure BMI on today's scale, and it's not a clear indicator. And it's not a good function to determine health, but a lot of practitioners still use that to say, hey, you're obese.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
I see it I still see BMI every day in the charts because I still work only very rarely.
Yeah.
As a palliative care nurse at Kaiser still, which I love because it sort of scratches that itch of that end of life care that I do have a passion for.
Sure.
But I don't have to go if I don't want to.
Yeah. No,
that
that's
makes
a
it
nice
very
thing.
different. Like if it's impacting my mental health, I don't go.
Yeah. Totally.
It's crazy how entrenched like these ideas get, and how people are so married to the idea that they don't want to change, or and it's crazy. Like another example is like lab testing, like Western medicine lab testing. The norms are based on a group of people that are unhealthy Americans.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so when a traditionally trained Western medicine doctor looks at your labs, is completely different than the way a naturopath would look at them.
Totally.
And, you know, it's just...
They're measuring for, you're at a baseline of healthy, and then naturopaths will measure, okay, we want to be optimal. So you don't get to this baseline. How can we practice something that's holistic to get you out of this cycle of unhealthiness or just borderline healthy?
Right.
So we can prevent you from getting to that point and have longevity and health span.
And they don't want to compare you to a group of people that are unhealthy.
Totally.
You know, what's ideal is, So it's a whole different training.
So you're a nurse. I'm gonna condense this because we had a technical malfunction. You worked at Kaiser. You started at Mercy. You worked on a very tough first day. So kind of give me like a very brief thumbnail sketch of first day of nurse ending up to where you ended up before you decided to leave and pursue what you did next.
My first real job as a nurse after I graduated was at Mercy on a cardiac step-down unit.
Mm-hmm.
And then I knew that someday I did want to work in end-of-life hospice care.
Yeah.
But you don't say no to a full-time, daytime job as a new nurse in a hospital. So that's, part of the reason why I did it. And I was lucky, very lucky to get that. And then I worked for a couple of community hospices. And then I sort of landed at Kaiser, which was sort of the dream job, supervising a team of hospice doctors, nurses, chaplains, social workers.
And so for people that don't know what the step down first day on the job is, tell me what like your first day experience was.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Brand new nurse, so excited, like so idealistic. I walked in and there was a nurse sitting down and she was doing her charting, and she looked up and she was just crying, just tearful. You could see she was embarrassed. She was like pissed. Yeah, it was crazy. I remember like nurses would walk into the break room and throw their phones across the room.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like
And this is pre-pandemic.
This was pre-pandemic.
Way
yeah.
pre-pandemic.
And we had a union. I never got breaks, like never got a break.
Wow.
Like, and they were 12-hour shifts that were always at least 14-hour shifts.
Yeah.
And calling you every day to work because there was never enough. There were never enough people.
There's always a nurse shortage, huh?
Yeah.
And that's why they're bringing in people from out of the country to fill in those gaps.
Yeah, yeah.
So you were the nurse, and then you worked in Mercy, you went to Kaiser, and then the pandemic happened. Tell me about the experience with the pandemic and how that kind of led the pathway for your second career.
Definitely working in end-of-life care, it's hard enough.
Yeah.
And then the pandemic hit. And it's true that we just did not have the supplies, the PPE that we needed. And the nurses, we were all just so scared. We were so scared because we knew that the nurses really weren't protected the way they should be with the equipment that they needed, but they still had to go in and take care of dying people. But what happened is that for a while, everything that we could do over the phone, we did over the phone. But can you imagine being that family who's taking care of a patient who's dying, where most of the instruction was coming over the phone? But when there was like a crisis, like a pain crisis or something like that, we really did have to go in. And we wanted to, but we couldn't. It was like the policy because they were trying to protect everybody. Yeah. But then, you get to go in, but then like the CDC says that you can wear just a regular mask, a surgical mask, but everybody knew that was bullshit and we needed N95s. Yeah. And so those nurses are like, well, what if I get this and I take this home to my family, Just the same
they
thing
have
that
a moral
everybody
dilemma,
was,
right?
Right.
Do I treat this person or do I care about my family? And those people on the front line, they went in and took care of their family.
Yeah, and they all wanted to. They all went in and worked. I think the hardest part was being afraid that they were going to get COVID but not be symptomatic, and then give that and like take out a whole facility full of
because
old
there was
people.
So much unknown at the time.
Yeah, it was incredibly stressful and crazy.
You told me this story that wasn't recorded about how you guys all knew you need an N95 mask. And you were told to put it in a paper bag. Yeah. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So there literally just was not enough PPE
to go around.
And then when the CDC changed the guidelines, there was still not enough PPE. And I do think like there might have been like warehouses and stuff full of PPE, but nobody knew what was going to happen. So they couldn't just like give out all of the masks and then not. It was an impossible situation, and there's no blame going
we're
around
not talking
here.
About
this
blame.
is not
we're just
right. So the nurses were given one N95 mask for the entire week, and they had to keep it in a paper bag and reuse it.
Wow. Because I remember, like, if you had an N95 mask, I was like, how'd you get that?
Yeah.
Who do I know to get one of those?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know someone? Like, let me have one of those. So the pandemic was scary. It added stress on top of stress. And part of the reason I wanted to interview this, what we got into earlier, was the art of reinvention. And in my field, I feel like a lot of people got stuck. I remember this one time I was in deposition and I saw this guy. I don't remember how old he was, but he was overworked, overweight, overstressed. And he looked at me and was like, I got a 2-hour commute from Santa Clarita, downtown LA, and then I got to go 2 hours back. Don't ever do this. And that stuck with me to this day. If I ever get to be that person, I'm not going to be that person.
Yeah.
And you got to a point where you had a reckoning. Talk to us about that.
It was getting to the point where I was driving home just thinking about what my cocktail was going to be, what I was going to eat. And that was my whole life. Was just
self-soothing,
work and in
unhealthy ways.
Just trying to completely detach myself from anything else emotional. And it really did affect my family too. Part of it was affecting my relationship, especially with my husband, because I didn't want to talk.
Yeah. You
and
just
I
want to
couldn't
go
really
home
talk about everything, all the sad stuff that was happening at work. And you don't want to just like bring that home every day. It just like in a ridiculous amount of stress. So it was that, and being like, oh, I could just drive off that bridge, even though I didn't have a plan to do it or anything. But it really got to a point where I knew it was affecting my relationship. It was affecting my mental health so much that I felt like I was crawling out of my skin, and I could keep it together at work. And I did a really good job of keeping it together at work. Yeah. But
not
I
home.
really had no life. And then also, I guess you work in end of life care, you know that you only have so much time.
That's taxing anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, you're in a stressful situation. And I think everyone thinks their job is stressful, and it probably is. You want to give credence to the people that are doing their work. It's totally stressful. But each job has its own stresses, and you take that home with you. You can't just flip a switch and say it's off. I know that's been a struggle with my wife and I. Like at 6 o'clock or whenever I get home, I can't just turn off if I have a bad day.
Right. You got to process. And our culture doesn't give us time to process anything.
And one thing you mentioned before our recording got stopped, and I want to re-explore, is the role of mental health and actually pursuing or getting therapy to deal with the shit that you're repressing. Tell me about your experience with going to see a therapist and how that helped lead you into your new adventure.
Oh yeah. You know how you just know something's got to change, like shit's got to be different?
Yeah.
I started going to a therapist who was amazing, and I just would say I was in this pattern. I didn't even realize I was doing it. And now I look back at it and it's almost funny. Like I would say, I can't leave because of this. Or I can't because of this, or because of that, or because of that. And we did have a lot of discussions about, like, you have this, you work so hard to get to this point in your career. Right.
That's what we were talking about.
And then you have to reframe it and like really think about like, who is it that I want to be? And what kind of relationships do I want to have? And that took a lot of work. And then also like kind of having a breakdown and
like what's important in my life.
Yeah. And then mental health wise, it was really hard. I started Zoloft because of other things, like some things in my past with my ex-husband and all that kind of stuff. You have just so many series of traumas that you can deal with before you really do have PTSD.
Yeah.
And then I was diagnosed with PTSD, and I started Zoloft, and that made a huge difference. But it was really hard to admit that I needed it. And so it's a humbling experience. Like especially in the medical field, and I don't know about your field, but you're judged by how you handle everything.
Yes.
Like you're not, it doesn't
how well
affect
you compartmentalize.
Right. You go take care of that patient and you go to the next one and you're still fun.
Yeah. You got to be peppy and upbeat all the time.
And it's
taxing,
and they look
right?
down on you. Like it's a culture that we expect way too much from ourselves and from our coworkers. And it's almost like a competition. And I really see that with the doctors too.
Yeah. And I think a subcomponent of that is conversation we had with your dad, who is a former lawyer. Is a large part of your career is your identity.
Yeah.
And you have worked so hard to get to where you're at. And then all of a sudden you hit a break point where like maybe your identity does not fit where you want to go with your next chapter in your life.
Yeah.
And it's hard for people to disentangle themselves from something they've worked up so hard for.
Yeah.
And put in so much equity, sweat, research, education, training, otherwise, to get to that point, and to have that ability to say, okay, I am this person, but I don't want to be this person anymore. Mm-hmm. But I've worked so hard at this. Am I a failure if I step away from this and move on to the next chapter in my life? And I feel like a lot of people in my field, your field, whatever field it may be, feel like they're stuck.
Yes.
So talk to me about how you were able to have the humility and tell your ego it's okay, to have the acceptance to pursue something that was better for you, your family, and your mental health.
Yeah, well, part of it was I got to this point where saying, just because I'm good at this doesn't mean that I have to keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you have like, I guess like a talent or something like that, like if you were some amazing basketball player, but you didn't want to play basketball anymore, you shouldn't play basketball.
Well, I think that's like a lot of professional athletes.
Yeah.
They have to retire at 35. And for our field, that's like when you're just entering not even the prime of your career.
Right.
So they have to go and figure out what's next.
And you don't want to be the one that like pusses out.
Yeah.
Right. And you have, and it is like, and there are just so many talented, incredible, like really, really smart people that you work with all the time. And it's just a culture of like, well, they couldn't hack it, instead of like, no, this is not the way I want to live my life.
Sure.
Like I would rather live longer and have a healthy relationship with my husband and not have to get divorced again.
Yeah.
You know,
And you started your career later in life too, as well.
Yeah.
So there was that extra stresses of I had to do this to take care of the family.
Yeah.
And I had to be the breadwinner to make sure my 2 kids were
taken care
of, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then, you know, they were great about making changes, and they saw what was happening, and they were really instrumental in like supporting those changes, because they were like, well,
they wanted their mom back.
Yeah. They're like, and Kingsley wanted his wife back.
Yeah.
And it was also coming to a point of like my ego that other people really can do this job. It's not just me, like letting go of that control too. And like nurses are known for control, look at our moms. Sorry.
Yes, parents. You guys like to control everything.
Yeah, right.
And so do I.
Yeah,
and
absolutely. So it took work to get there, but also there's some, like, how do you want to live your life?
Yeah, you don't want to be that burnout 65-year-old mean, bitter person.
Fat nurse smoking cigarettes and on my break or whatever, and just thinking about what I wanted to drink on the way home.
Yeah, and the other component people also factor into is the financial component.
Oh, that's huge.
Nurses make a lot of money. I shouldn't say a lot of money. They make a comfortable living.
Yeah. And
how hard was it to walk away from that financial security?
So hard, because you get used to having the money, but then you have the money and then you buy all the shit that you don't really need because you don't have time to take a vacation anyway, right? And then, you know, maybe I have really nice clothes, but my body is falling apart.
Yeah.
You know? So
the clothes look nice, but I don't look nice in the clothes.
Right, exactly. And then so it's just like this, and therapy helps so much with this, is really like stepping back about like, what do I truly value and who do I really want to be? And making a change and taking care of yourself is not a failure. It's actually being brave. It's
growth. And that's one of the reasons I identified you as one of like my first people I want to talk to, because I've experienced where I felt stuck and am I going to be a lawyer for the rest of my life? And I'm fearful of transitioning away from all the things we've discussed, and watching you and our cousin Tamara, who's going to be referenced many times prior and ongoing, just make these transitions, these pivots in life. I know there was a lot of thought and courage to do that, but you guys are badasses, and it's neat to see that. And you guys were an inspiration to all of us who were like, maybe this isn't for us. Maybe that we can combine what we're doing and explore new opportunities.
Yeah.
So I think that's neat for a lot of people that might feel where they're like, I don't know what to do next. Giving them some nuggets like, hey, it's okay to go out and fail and fall flat on your face and experience financial insecurity.
Yeah.
As long as you have the support behind you, and obviously your family bought in. Mm-hmm. And that's a huge factor, and you have to have that support behind you in order to make that transition. So tell me about, you still are a nurse, but then you got into doing something different from being a full-time Kaiser nurse. Tell me about the transition to where you're at now.
Prior to COVID, one of my best friends who's a nurse practitioner and my husband had this conversation while
Cheers.
This is a good time to take a sip, because they know how I feel about this.
And Kingsley was in here earlier, but he had to bow out.
So I was working, getting my ass completely kicked at Kaiser, and everybody was, but anyway, my friend and my husband had this conversation, and she was like, let's open an IV business. Mm-hmm. And
Kingsley was like, cool, sign me up.
Yeah. And they're like, let's do it. And instead, no. So my friend did not come to me and talk to me about this first. And Kingsley actually didn't talk to me about it. They came to me together and told me that they decided that they were doing it. So I wasn't even part of the conversation. No. But I also was pretty checked out, I think.
Yeah.
You know, like I know I did not have the brain space for that.
Yeah, you're like, and whatever, honey.
Yeah, exactly. and they're both really creative people.
Totally.
But I was also like, good luck, you guys, because they are both like big idea people. Big idea people, right? Yeah. And I'm like, oh, I can't manage them too. You know what I mean? But they did a really great job, and they opened this IV business, and they were doing well. And then COVID hit, and then when COVID hit, obviously the nurses couldn't go into people's houses.
Tough time to open that business,
right? And so they transitioned, and they made a great transition to COVID testing, and which the community needed. It was amazing what they did, and it was. I'm really proud of what they did.
And they lead with their heart as well.
That's why they absolutely just like did. You. Oh yeah. Well, I'm lucky. Yeah, you try to surround yourself with people.
Yeah, you're some of the 5 best people that surround you, right?
Yeah, exactly. But they did a great job with that. But then they were starting to transition out of COVID. Like COVID was still happening, but we knew what was happening. Things had settled down and everything else. And
the world was going to open up again.
Right. And I knew I needed to leave sooner. But you don't leave in the middle of a battle.
Yeah.
And I know there were other people could do it, but you don't leave your team in the middle of a battle. So I wasn't going to leave in the middle of COVID, even though I knew it was time.
It was time.
Thank God for Zoloft and wine.
And wine.
Don't drink.
And Tamara.
Yeah. And yes.
And
your friends.
Naturopath doctors.
Yes. And Tamara was a big inspiration for sure. Like, you know, I remember her telling me that stress is what's going to kill you.
She told me the same thing. And I was telling you guys earlier that I got this glucose test and we ran the battery test. She's like, oh, you're pre-diabetic? I'm like, how?
Yeah.
And I know she's like, do you think it's stress? I'm like, I don't feel stressed out. Then I'm like, maybe. I don't know. My body maybe has this natural resistance, or my mind has this natural resistance to tests where my body doesn't. So
yeah,
it totally affects your body.
It does. But I think, you know, our culture, we're taught not to feel. You know, and I think that's getting better. But I look at our parents, and my poor dad, when he goes to the doctor and he has pain, he can't admit that it's pain.
Yeah.
Like, it's pain that he's feeling, but he's like, it's this pressure, blah, 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 but it's not pain.
Because you don't want to come off as a whiner.
Right, exactly. And this is, I'm pretty sure we grew up the same way, but like, if I fell down, like, don't cry, get up.
Yeah, there's some dirt.
Right. Exactly.
Put some dirt on it.
Exactly. You know, and I think, and it wasn't as bad for us as it was for our parents.
Yeah.
But I do feel like in our culture, we're taught not to feel. So we remain productive.
Yeah. We value productivity and success and achievement.
Yeah.
That being said, at some point you left Kaiser and then you joined.
I joined the family business.
You joined the family business. Tell us how that went.
The IV business wasn't really picking up as much. And then Tamara, our cousin, who's awesome, a naturopathic doctor. Tamara. Yes. I feel like she partially saved my life. I do.
I don't deny that feeling. She saved me from a lot of stressful situations.
Yeah.
And she would not encourage me drinking wine, but sorry, Tamara.
You know, moderation, right, Tam?
Sorry, Tamara.
Right.
That's always been the crux of my problem.
So Tamara was like, it's so cool, Jenny, that you guys have access to these things that can really help people that are so much healthier for people, like NAD it's crazy. Like, we started doing more NAD treatments, and people
What's NAD for people that don't know what it is?
Well, basically what it is it's something that your body produces naturally, but as you age, you don't produce as much of it, just like
testosterone.
Like testosterone. And so you can give your body NAD, and what that does is when you get an IV or you put NAD in your body, it goes to every cell in your body.
Got it.
And it helps with like cellular turnover, and basically like helps clean out your brain.
So it's like for people my age, guys that are losing their testosterone, she put me on couple of natural supplements that help increase
To boost
testosterone
it.
if you're
Mhm.
lower on the testosterone side. So there
Right.
are natural components you can take without having to take the pharmaceutical stuff
Right.
to get you back in line or to help you get optimized.
Yeah, to help your body repair itself.
Got it.
And so, but NAD is amazing. Like, if there are people who have dementia, you start NAD and then all of a sudden they're not getting lost in familiar places.
Yeah.
Or people, we saw a lot of people who lost their sense of taste and smell and did NAD from COVID and were able to regain.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Or like glutathione.
And there's so many,
amazing.
NAD is just one example of so many natural things that you can take.
Yeah.
And you don't want to start going out and taking all this stuff because you think you have it. You have to take it under the direction of the doctor.
Oh gosh, yeah. Don't get
and
it
go get tested.
Just
and
somewhere.
Obviously.
Yeah. Get your labs tested. There's still some reasons why you shouldn't take it. But one thing that I didn't talk about that was a huge part of my life, where glutathione helped me so much, where it's partially where I feel like Tamara sort of saved my life too, is when I was working at Mercy as a cardiac nurse. I had terrible back issues and ended up having to get a fusion.
I remember you were put on light duty for a while, or even on disability.
Yeah. I mean, it took, I wasn't off for a year, but it took a full year to actually truly recover from that. And that was a big reason why I had to rethink like what I was doing.
It was this career for me. It's a physical career.
Yeah. But anyway, so I called it vitamin I. I took so much ibuprofen
and
for
that stuff's
years.
bad for you at some point, right?
So much ibuprofen for years. And then found Tamara helped me, and I started glutathione, and I don't even think about my back anymore. It's
That's
crazy.
amazing.
But I mean, it's Pilates and losing weight and all that stuff.
It's not
too.
just one miracle drug. It's a whole holistic approach that these doctors encourage.
Yes, and it helps so much. But it's just so sad that
people get pushed on pharmaceutical meds just to cope with the pain, not treat the root cause of the symptoms, right?
Exactly. And that is a terrible issue that still is in Western medicine. Like, I'm reading this book called Dr. Tan's Circle of Women. Mm-hmm. And it's about this 16th century Chinese doctor. And when a female doctor, very cool book. It's it's a historical novel. But so like based on, a true story. When a doctor would diagnose something back then in Chinese medicine, it wasn't like, oh, you have anemia. It was like, oh, the diagnosis is you're overworked. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, so, I might go to the doctor and say I'm fatigued and everything, and they might take my blood tests and find out that my iron's low and give me ferritin or an iron supplement, instead of saying like, oh, this is happening because your diet,
instead of
because you're malnourished. Sure. Or you're trying to lose too much weight and you're not getting enough protein or whatever.
Or for me personally, sorry to cut you off, it might be like, why is your glucose so high? It might be because you're stressed out. So instead of taking whatever you might prescribe, go address the root cause. Stop being stressed out.
Right. Let's get you started on insulin or whatever.
Yeah.
If you're pre-diabetic and not diabetic, so you wouldn't do that. But if you got to that point, they just say, well, take metformin, take this pill, and it'll lower your blood sugar, instead of saying, maybe you need to look at your life.
Yeah. Your lifestyle might be causing your issues that are manifesting in your health, right?
And I love that about this book, where they talk about how they diagnose, and they actually diagnose what's really happening, instead of, it's just anemia.
I think that's a beautiful thing that is now happening with Western culture, because they are good at diagnosing the problem. There's so many benefits to the Western approach.
Yeah.
But now the holistic approach is now meeting the Western approach, and there's a nexus of where they're having harmony, and now we're understanding that there is complementary paths to addressing certain things, because some things need to be addressed with the Western approach, and some things need to be addressed with more holistic approaches.
Yeah.
And they can work in tandem and harmony, and at the same time you can come together and figure out, okay, maybe the root of this problem is not going to be fixed by a medication. It might be fixed by me not doing something that I've been doing in my life.
Yeah.
And our culture is so driven by success and achievement and
Productivity.
And productivity, and it's hard to de-wire yourself from that mindset.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Tamara and I have talked a lot about this. Like, yeah, it's crazy, but it is. I think it is getting better. I kind of think about it like religion, because I do see I think sometimes some people are like, oh, Western medicine completely sucks, or naturopathic doctors are
They're
quacks.
like quacks, right?
But I kind of like being in this middle spot where it's almost like, I was raised Catholic.
Yeah.
So I just leave out all the other crap that I didn't like, but took the values or certain things that made sense. Yeah. And I feel like that is happening. It's starting to happen.
And there's a conversation that's happening, and the science is starting to incorporate all facets of treatment and understanding. And I think there's a new emphasis on not just treatment, but prevention.
Yes. Yeah. And but then there's such an incentive for pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies and all that to keep us sick. And I really do. And I do not in any way believe it's the doctors that I work with every day. It's not the people that I work with. It's not, we are cogs in that machine. But
it's $1 billion industry that only gets richer by us taking more meds, right?
Right, exactly. It's like, keep them sick, like keep them in front of the TV and fat, because so we can keep selling metformin.
Yeah.
And it's, I never would have thought that when I started nursing, but with my experience, and I'm not a conspiracy theory person, I do believe that that does happen.
Well, I mean, the old adage, follow the money.
Yeah.
Right. And then that leads to a lot of untruth. So we talked about your journey as a nurse and you getting into the IV process. But I want to kind of flip the script and talk about you getting healthy and what Tamara brought to the table and what your Pilates training brought to the table. Tell us about your turning the corner and leaving, not necessarily leaving being a nurse, because I know you still are consulting with Kaiser, but your balance between being a nurse, a mom, a wife, a daughter, and being healthy at the same time. How did you marry all those?
Well, it's so funny. Now I have like 3 jobs.
You only got busier.
But balanced.
Yeah.
I feel like I have room for my husband, I feel, and he even says like,
Kingsley's needy.
Yes, he is. He's cute though. Yeah. Thank God. But he'll say, I got my Jenny back, which makes me feel like, oh man, I kind of feel bad about that. And the boys too. I think I have a stronger relationship with them now. But so now what I do is I still have my own little business, and Tamara and I both like aesthetics too. That we've talked a lot about that stuff. So I learned how to do aesthetics. So I still have my aesthetics business. So that's like a little side gig kind of thing.
Yeah.
I still work per diem at Kaiser, but I have that. I will not take a job where they say I have to be there like 2 or 3 days a week or whatever. I am only obligated to work 4 days a month, and I can pick up lots of shifts if I want to. And often I do because they need help, or I want to take a trip or something like that. The money helps, but having control of saying like, my soul just can't take it today, or I can't bring what I need to bring to these people. I don't have to take that shift. And it's made a huge impact about how I show up. I show up better for the patients and the families, but I'm also much more balanced.
Totally.
And then I fell in love with Pilates. I have a friend who was like, I really think that you should try this, Jenny. My friend Paige, who's made a huge difference in my life by introducing me to Pilates, because I've always been so scared about hurting my back.
Yeah. Because of your history, right?
Yeah, because of my history and having a fusion as a nurse. Like, that's
career ending.
Nurse. Yeah, it can be career ending.
Totally. And that's scary. I mean, fusion's scary for anyone, especially when, I mean, we're not young, but we're not old yet.
Yes, exactly. So I I started going to Pilates classes and I sort of fell in love with it. So I'm a Pilates apprentice, and I just took my big test and I passed my big test. I know. So anyway, now.
Sorry, Tamara.
And thank you, Tamara, because you also suggested Pilates, but and so now I'm a Pilates teacher too.
Congratulations.
So Kingsley and I were laughing because we just got all our W-2s and I have 3 of them.
more problems, more money, right?
Yeah.
Now you got the accountant to come into the situation.
So just way more balance.
So some things I take away from that is the art of saying no.
Yeah.
And that's been something I've heard like Tim Ferriss reference, and people, especially my brother, reference. At some point, you can say yes to everything out of fear, but you start saying no to things out of abundance. And it's a fear versus abundance mindset. And my other person that enlightened me to this was my financial advisor, Abiel. He's like, hey, you're always going to be able to pull in things, but are you doing it out of fear or abundance? And when you decide in your mind, I'm doing this because I need to make more money, or I'm doing this because it's going to make an impact on what I'm doing. If you do it out of that mindset, you're always going to get more in return. And that took me so long to learn, and I'm still learning it. I still have that fear in my mind, like for my business,
always. Yeah.
like, I see some numbers. I need to bring in more numbers. But then I step back sometimes and I'm like, some of those people or those cases I brought in, I only brought in because I was scared, and they turned out to be something that became a problem later on, or something I took on because I shouldn't have taken it on. And the other component that I took away from that was the ability to adapt to something new. And for you, it was Pilates. For me, it was getting into yoga a long time ago. And I have gotten away from that, but I got into it probably 10 years ago. And I think Tamara and I got into it at the same time.
Yeah.
And my wife was a certified yoga instructor. And I was like, yoga's for, filling the stereotype. And then I got in my first class and I was like,
oh, this kicked my ass.
Oh my gosh. And then and the physical side, I only went in for the physical side, and it took me 4 or 5 years to get into the mental side.
Yes.
And now the mental side for me is more important than the physicality I get out of doing that. So it's learning to set aside your ego, I think, and that's the constant battle I face. And I think we've talked about that, like in a career change, or even if you're only making a career modification, working 2 days instead of full time, or working per diem, whatever it may be. And for me, instead of working 90 hours in the business, hiring people to take on my load so I can focus on doing this stuff, talking to people. And that's taken me so long to learn that lesson.
Yeah, and it's almost like one of those things where you're going to have to check yourself for a long time, huh?
It's a practice.
Because it's just...
Because we're hardwired to like fight against it.
Oh, yeah.
And
absolutely.
I want to fill my time with, if I have idle time, I got to fill it up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I know. It's almost like you're scared to be quiet with yourself. I really stopped sleeping well when my first husband and I split up. It was awful. Like the whole thing.
Yeah.
And starting nursing school. So it was like not wanting to fail, and knowing that I have these 2 little boys that I was responsible for, and that he was not
contributing to at all.
And also making our lives really, really hard.
Yeah, he was not a nice person, and I don't have any problem saying that.
Yeah. Like the whole thing. That's when I stopped sleeping. And for years and years and years, even until up before I left Kaiser, I wasn't sleeping well. And when I kind of had that little bit of like, I could drive off that bridge, which is not a healthy place to be.
Not a nice mindset to be in, right?
Right. A doctor told me about Yoga Nidra, which is a type of meditation, which I always was like, my dad would be like, oh, what's that hippie shit? Tease me about it. Right. But it is an amazing practice where it's a guided meditation, and it was actually, you sort of focus on one part of your body at a time. And I think that was really beneficial for me too, because like we kind of talked about, like we're conditioned not to feel pain or not to feel anything and not be in touch with your body. It really helped me start getting in touch with my body. And I had tried Ambien. I took Benadryl from the time I was in nursing school and still while I was working at Kaiser, which is
Just to go to
terrible
sleep,
for your
yeah.
brain. And yoga nidra made a huge difference. So, and that's the nice thing that I really like about Pilates. When you're in a Pilates class, you have to pay attention to what you're doing, and you can't think about anything else. You can't think about like the grocery list.
Yeah.
You can't think about like what's going on at work or anything, but it
You have to
actually
be in the moment,
gives,
right?
yes, and I really feel like it gives your brain, like maybe like yoga did for you, a chance to heal.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Or at least time and space to get away from the chaos that is our society, and it's only increasing. You know, we're older, and it's when you're young, you're like, nah, I can deal with it. But I feel really bad for our new generation because there's just so much more than what we grew up with.
So much coming
so
at
much
them.
more.
I know. I'm so grateful the boys aren't like, my boys aren't into like a lot of social media and all that stuff, but it's like, but we are all inundated with too much.
We are, and we are inundated, and I think social media has its good and bad sides.
Yeah.
There's
Obviously,
definitely a positive benefit to it. There's communities that people otherwise wouldn't be connected to, but there's also that rabbit hole you can go down and become negatively
You're just getting your dopamine hits, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, but being aware of all that, but yoga nidra or like things that I thought were just like woo woo, and a lot of people,
the woo woo stuff,
right. That a lot of like even the people that I work with now are like, oh, okay, yeah, whatever. But you know, guess what? I don't have to take Benadryl or Ambien anymore.
Yeah,
you know?
Thank God, right?
Yeah,
and now my brain's happy.
Yeah, well, hopefully it's healing.
I don't have that dramatic of experience, but I remember when I was first working and starting my own business, 3 to 4 hours was my nightly. If I got 4 hours, 5 hours, that was my nightly sleep.
Yeah, that's.
And now if I don't get 7, don't talk to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Don't talk to me.
It's not a good day. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. It's crazy. And it's also a privilege to get to a point in your life where you do have the support. Like my husband gave me the support, and my boys gave me the support, like being like, yeah, we want you to be better, Mom. We want you to change. And knowing that, you know, we might have some financial instability and all those things, but being willing to accept that, where some people are just like when I was going through my breakup with my first husband and everything that was happening in my life, like if people would have been like, why are you using that plastic water bottle? I'd be like, fuck you. I'm not thinking about plastic right now.
Yeah, I'm just trying to support my kids.
Right. So I do feel so grateful that, you know, I've had the support.
And we're very
of my
fortunate.
Family that there were so many years that I would have been like, I'm not worried about like toxins in my candle.
Yeah.
You
know, you struck a chord. We are privileged.
Yeah.
And we are very lucky to have people around us that support us in our journey to get to a healthier point in our life. For those people that might be listening, the one or two that don't have that privilege or the support system, are there any things that you can recommend?
Yeah.
Or have you come across people that aren't as fortunate as you and I to have the support behind us to make those changes? What would you say to that?
If you don't have the support and the maybe healthy people around you who you can support, stop telling yourself that you can't find those people, because you can. And you have to, I mean, I think about like my friendships from when I was in my 20s to now, how much they've changed. And a lot of it is that you have to make that conscious decision about who you surround yourself with. And sometimes you feel like, oh, you don't want to disappoint someone, or you think that because you've been friends for so long or whatever, that you have that you're stuck in, that you can't change that. But you really can, like going from, I did, you know, I feel like I had friends who were like me, who maybe were already married, got married young, had kids, or, you know, maybe didn't have a lot of education, who were not supportive of my
what
becoming
you're
a
trying
nurse.
to do.
And then you have to put yourself first and know that you have to change the people around you. You know, you have to surround yourself with people and be brave enough to leave if they're not.
I think you hit the nail on the head. And I think that's the hard part is there are certain people that you're friends with, reasons and seasons. And at some point, those people, they got you to a point. And it's not that you're shedding them, but you're saying, hey, look, at this point in my life, I gotta go this direction, and we might go this way. I'm doing this, and if you want to come along. And it's you feel so guilty about doing that.
Yeah, you do.
And it's going back to saying no to me.
Yeah.
To saying no to a lot of those relationships that might be toxic or they might be anchors on what you're trying to do. And it's
right.
I'm not saying you're a bad person.
No.
But I'm going this way, and you guys were causing me to go this way, and it might create discord in your friendship and it may result in losing friends.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you're only responsible for yourself.
Right.
And if those people can't get on board with you, then for me, they're not true friends.
Yeah, yeah. And I think just knowing that you can make those changes. But so I would say if you really do feel stuck, surround yourself with the people that you want to be.
Go find that community.
Yes. And you will find it.
Yeah, because there's so many people that
feel
that. If you feel that way, there's other people that feel that way.
Yeah.
It might be hard to find that community, but you have to be brave to do that. And it takes a brave person to do that. And it's really fucking hard.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to talk to you and Tamara, because you guys did it and inspired me to do what I'm doing and make some changes in my life. So part of the reason I did this podcast not only was to reconnect with family, friends, and hopefully get some other people that will help distill some knowledge, but was just to help people that look up that might not be like the Jeff Bezos that I consider successful. For, you define your own success, financial, personal, professional. And I look at you and I'm so proud of you.
Oh, thanks.
And I just wanted to connect with people that might be going through this situation. And this is a long-winded way of saying, are there any other tidbits, resources, or anything that you can tell me that would help me or help any one or two other three people that might be listening to this?
I don't know if you've heard the let them theory.
No, I haven't.
Well, some people might, like Mel Robbins, who I feel is kind of abrasive and aggressive. She's not my favorite, but she does talk about the let them theory. And I do think it's really helpful in that if someone doesn't think you can do it, then let them think that, right?
Yeah.
Don't fight them. Don't, let them. And then you decide whether or not you want to pursue that relationship or let it go, right? So that has helped me a lot in my life. I work with really amazing, talented doctors who have amazing education.
Sure.
But sometimes you have to stand up to them, right?
Yeah.
And I might have just a little bit of education compared to them, but I know what's right and wrong. And I've been a nurse for a long time and I freaking know some things, not all of it, that's for sure, but some things. And if they think that they're above you or whatever, you can't let that stop you from doing the right thing. So let them think you're an idiot, but still ask the question that you need to ask so that patient gets taken care of or whatever.
When
so
you
can
ask
sleep
that
at
question,
night.
they're going to be like, oh shit.
Yeah.
But they're not going to let you know that they thought that.
Right, exactly. So, or even in your life where you're making decisions about your life, like I'm sure it was really hard for my parents when they're like, oh, Jenny works so hard. They're financially secure. I don't have to worry about that for Jenny anymore. Right. And then to be like, oh, well, now you're going to go do this crazy business with your husband.
Yeah.
Right.
What the
fuck?
Fuck?
Yeah. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And they didn't say that. I'm sure they were thinking it, but they're just too cool to. But also there were a lot of people who were saying, that's crazy. Why are you doing
all
this?
The doubters, right?
Right. And then, right.
But it's not to say that like that first business succeeded, because it didn't.
Right.
And then you found another way to make it work. Right.
But it's also like, well, you can think what you want to think, but let them think what they want to think and you go do what's right for you.
Sure.
And so I do think that that's really helpful. And it does take
a lot of courage.
And, you just have to be willing to work hard for what you want.
Yeah.
You know,
You have to be very secure with yourself in order to get that. But you're right. You have to be brave in order to let people say what they say and let it roll like Teflon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
And part of my issue was getting reactive in the moment to hearing all that noise, and then learning, like, instead of reacting, your initial reaction is to defend yourself.
Right.
And doing nothing is the best antidote to all that stuff.
Yeah, you take your power back.
Yeah, you're like, all those people will say this and they want you to engage with them.
Right.
And at some point you're just like, I'm sorry, I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Or maybe I do care, but I'm not going to engage. I'm going to just put my nose this way.
Mm-hmm.
And it might hurt me, but I know if I don't engage with those people, or I don't react or respond,
mm-hmm.
you're not getting what you want, and I'm getting what I need to do for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do think that, yes, that's a good skill. Good job.
Yay.
But I also just want to say how proud I am of you.
Oh, thank you.
You're such a good person. You've always been, like, Logan has always been like a gentle soul, but not a pushover. Even when he was a little kid, you've always been like that.
Well, they all think you're younger than me, so.
I don't think so. And he's always worked hard and always been someone you can go to and talk to in a real way. And I'm incredibly proud of you.
Well, thank you. It makes me, I take that with great sincerity. And now I'm blushing and turning red. So I think I'm going to have to drink some wine. Cheers to that, cousin. I love having you here. Now the fun part of this. Yes. We're in your dad's house.
Yes.
We're looking at this cool wall.
This is my inheritance when my dad dies. It's not money. It's baseball cards. And all kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah. If I was to ask you UCLA or SC, where would you send your kids?
Oh, my dad would, if he died, he'd haunt me if I sent him to UCLA. It would have to be USC. I just have to win the lottery to send them to school.
That's okay. And then the running competition in our family.
Oh, yeah.
Is you guys are Giants fans and I'm Dodger fans.
I know.
How do you feel about the current Dodgers situation buying up the market?
I'm so sick of it. It makes me so mad. Like, it's like big pharma almost. It's no fun if, like, the Yankees and the Dodgers always fucking win.
Yeah, it's not fair.
Sorry, I'm not sure if I was supposed to say that word.
No, you can say whatever you want.
Yeah, but it's like buying your success isn't always fun. I'm so mad at De'Aaron Fox right now too.
Where'd he go?
Well, he wants to leave the Kings.
Oh, I heard about that.
Which is it's such a bummer where, they made that change from Mike Brown to Doug Christie and everybody was pissed because we all loved Mike Brown. He's a great guy.
He's a great coach.
But then obviously they made a good decision. The Kings started winning. They were doing great. Won like 11 out of 14 games. And then freaking De'Aaron Fox. Beam, right? Yeah. And then De'Aaron Fox is like, I'm out. I'm going to leave. And now they've lost the last 3 games or whatever. So anyway, sorry, sports. That was my tangent.
I know, it's hard to be a fan. I'm a 49ers fan. It was hard to watch them lose this year after being so successful the last couple of years, but not ultimately reaching the pinnacle of success and now seeing Mahomes again in the Super Bowl that I'm not going to watch.
Yeah, I'm kind of getting sick of him, huh?
Yeah. No, there's I guess there's fatigue, It's like when the Patriots were in, people got sick of Brady and you start nitpicking, but you just start nitpicking success, and it's, as someone who's on the other side of that, you just wish that guy would play for your team.
So true. So true. Yeah. But we'll always have a Dodger Giant. It's fun.
Yeah, it's fun. It's nice to see the divide in the families and how fanatical we can become over.
And we're not competitive at
No,
all.
not at all. Right? No. My mom's over here chewing her sock, probably going to listen to this. So, quick hitters. Favorite concert you've ever been to? I already know this answer, but I want you to tell me if I know. I think I know.
because I never got to go as a kid, and I had I didn't have like a bunch of crushes on, like for real. Like I was boy crazy. That's totally true. But I didn't have like a bunch of celebrity crushes. But the only musician I really had a crush on was Eddie Vedder.
Eddie Vedder.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, naturally, it's one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
One person I haven't seen in concert that I still would love to see.
Yeah, we should go.
We
gotta
will go
next time. So good. Yeah, still so good.
Favorite sports venue?
I miss Candlestick.
Oh, yes.
It was cold.
Windy.
And we would just get bundled up, and I'd get my chocolate malt with my dad. And my dad would, I think you know this, but my dad, we went to Catholic school, grade school, and we would be dressed in our Catholic school uniforms. And
ditching class.
Yeah, Dad would just drive right by, and we'd be on 80 on our way to San Francisco. So we'd go to Joe Marty's for breakfast, and then we'd go and we'd get there freaking hours before the game started. So my dad would send us down to get autographs and stuff from, because he's totally into collecting.
He couldn't tell.
So he used us. He absolutely pimped us
out.
As
any good dad should.
Right. So we'd get
Who
autographs.
Who can say no to a little kid?
Right. And I remember Vita Blue saying, like, why are you ditching school again? Isn't that funny? I loved Vita Blue. But anyway, yeah, I miss, it's nostalgic. I miss the grimy Candlestick, cold weather. I do.
Favorite memorabilia up here on the shelf?
Tommy Trojan is definitely my favorite. Just because the running joke is, well, end of life. I make my family talk about it because it's healthy.
It should be. You gotta have those conversations.
Right. And I mean, it's not that we have everything figured out, which you don't have to be, but but anyway, the whole joke is my dad says that he wants his ashes in his Tommy Trojan thing right there. And we tease him that he's not going to fit in Tommy Trojan. But anyway, Mary Tommy Trojan is mine when Dad kicks it, just so we know. Yeah, excellent. That's my favorite. Cracks me up.
Second favorite up there.
Gosh, that's a really hard question.
I know my wife said the Willie Mays baseball.
Yeah, that's pretty freaking cool. Bob Feller, my dad also used to take us to baseball card conventions and stuff. And Bob Feller, I know my dad's got a Bob Feller ball somewhere. I don't know if it's one of the ones that's up there because he's got boxes full of stuff. But he was such a freaking nice man. He was really cool. But also Ricky Henderson. We went
R.I.P. Ricky.
Oh, I know, just recently.
My favorite baseball player of all time.
I had no idea. I freaking love him. So I have a Ricky Henderson story.
Oh.
Such a nice man. So we went to a baseball card convention. And so Ricky was had his posse. Here's Ricky and then his whole posse following him. And Ricky was talking because that's, he was.
Ricky being Ricky.
Yeah, exactly. And he knocked me over. But I was a kid. You know what I mean? But he was so cool and so nice and so sorry that he did it. And then I was just like, I love Ricky Henderson and Vita Blue. They're my favorites.
He was. Yeah. There's so many stories you can Google about Ricky. My favorite story about Ricky is he got his first bonus check for $1 million. And they wrote him a check. And instead of cashing it, he put it on his wall, framed it, shellacked it. And then his accounting department's like, hey, Ricky, we're short $1 million. You going to cash that check? He's like, no, it's on my wall.
See, his priorities were in the right place.
Yeah.
And he was so fun to watch.
Yeah, he was an amazing baseball player. I don't think there's been anyone more entertaining than Ricky.
Yeah.
Favorite place you've traveled?
Guatemala.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Why?
Lake Atitlan. Because Lake Atitlan is beautiful and it's really, really hard to get to. And it's one of the very few places on earth where there are still certain villages still use their own dialect.
Oh, wow.
So the indigenous
So you can't speak Spanish?
No, yeah. And a lot of people, because it's so remote, even in the villages in different parts of the lake, you can't get there by car. You have to take a boat. So a lot of people that lived in those villages never leave their villages. And so it was just a beautiful incredibly beautiful, like untouched place. And the little town that we stayed in, they're just such good simple,
humans,
happy people. And they were just so pragmatic. Like if there's some like expat white creepy guy came in and they got bad vibes, they just like the village got together and they make a note, you know, they decide what they're going to do and put a note on the, you know, you've got 2 days to get out kind of thing. Like, I don't know. It was just so
community coming together and keeping everyone safe and happy.
Yeah. And just like the electricity would go out at night, and if you wanted a margarita, you got on the bike to make the margarita.
Yeah,
you know,
mechanical margaritas.
Yes, it was. You found a way to make it work, and it was a really amazing experience.
I see, and you did that with Kingsley.
Yeah.
When you guys were
younger,
brand new.
Yes,
and in love. We still are in love. I can see that
true.
every time you look at them. Favorite dessert from Grandma Sissy? Because I know what mine was.
From Grandma Sissy?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me.
The custard.
Oh, yeah. She loved that custard. Those little white. I still have some of those ramekins.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, I'm going to have to make you some.
Best dessert I've ever had.
Yeah. Oh, my God. She was amazing.
Maybe the pinwheels.
I know.
Your dad's favorite.
I know. Oh, my God. My dad still loves pinwheels. She used to get the Oreo ice cream sandwiches.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you've ever had one, but they are disgustingly wonderful.
All the bad things you shouldn't have.
Oh my God.
Red Dye 3 or whatever
good.
they are.
Yeah, but that was what was so neat about her. Is she would have, you know, whatever your favorite thing was, right? She made sure it was in the house.
She was such a sweet person.
Yeah.
Well, cousin, I love you.
I love you too.
Cheers.
Thanks, Loke.
To another one.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Quirky Podcast. I hope you enjoyed diving into another inspiring journey and found some nuggets of wisdom to take with you. If you love this episode, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a conversation. You can find all our episodes on your favorite podcast platforms and on YouTube. Until next time, stay curious, be inspired, and keep carving your own unique path. Catch you on the next episode of Quirky Podcast.